In 1982, two investigative reporters from Denver, Colorado heard a story they couldn't believe. It sent them on a month-long journey to track down the source of the story. Their journey took them to an old, beat-up trailer in the middle of the Mojave Desert in Nevada. Once there, they were told the scariest tale of their lives. Elijah Stone was the gentleman who opened the door to the trailer and invited them in. This is the story he told the two reporters. I haven't told this story to anyone in a very long time, as it brings back painful memories. I suppose I can tell it one more time before I die, as I'm an old man now. I was 12 years old when it first started, and it's something I shall never forget as long as I live. The year was 1912, and my mother had just died the year before. This caused my father to turn from an occasional drinker into a drunken fiend. Both my parents and their families had immigrated from Ireland to Charleston, South Carolina in the 1800s, so we were already being raised with an iron fist, but it got much worse after the death of our mother. I have two other siblings, both younger sisters. Their names are Sarah and Emily. Sarah would have been 8 at the time, and Emily would have been 6 years old. My mother had a younger sister, Aunt Martha, who collected porcelain dolls. I remember going to her house a lot, which was just down the road from ours, and seeing her house full of these dolls. She was married but was never able to have any kids of her own, so I got the feeling she thought of these dolls as her children. There was one doll in particular she named Annabelle, and it was the only doll she gave a name to. When I'd visit her house, I'd catch her whispering to this doll, acting like it was a real person, and she'd stop if she saw we noticed. She took extra special care of Annabelle, much more than the others. I remember it was always sitting in a chair next to my aunt and always with her wherever she was. It would even sleep in the same room as her, right next to her bed. That doll always gave me the creeps, and I hated it. My sisters didn't like it either and avoided it when we went over there. Sometimes we'd spend the night there, and none of us could sleep because the dolls were everywhere throughout the house. When I turned 13, my aunt suddenly got ill and passed away a few days later. The doctors never figured out what happened to her. It was really hard on her husband. I remember seeing him crying a lot after she died. He was a nice fellow, and I always liked him. One night after she passed, we heard a knock on our door. It was him, and he said to our father, Martha requested the dolls be passed down to the children should she ever die. He then brought in several big boxes of dolls, then left. There was a note taped to one of the boxes that read, "If you're reading this note, it means I'm dead. I want you kids to watch over my Annabelle for me. She's a special girl. If you take care of her, she'll take care of you." After reading that, a chill went up my spine. We opened the box, and I remember looking down at the doll. It looked as if it was staring straight up at me. I looked over at my two sisters who were vividly scared as well. Being it was late, our father was drunk and not in a good mood. He yelled at us to go back to bed. He never did have to tell us twice. I closed the lid to the box and went back to bed. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept seeing Annabelle's face staring at me from inside the box. When I woke up the next day and walked downstairs to the kitchen to make myself some breakfast, the boxes with the dolls were gone. I walked to the living room to see if my father had moved them and was surprised to see the dolls. My father had taken them out of the boxes and spread them throughout the living room. There, in the corner between some other dolls, was Annabelle. She was always easy to spot, as it was the only doll that wore a black dress. The others were in white or pink. I was angry my father had done that, but I wasn't about to argue with him about it. I tried to steer clear of him as much as possible. As we were eating breakfast that morning, my sisters whispered to me about the dolls being in the living room, saying they didn't like it either. I told them to be quiet because there was nothing we could do about it. We tried spending as little time as possible in the living room after that. A couple of days later, as my sisters and I were sitting in the kitchen one evening eating dinner, talking and laughing about something, there was a pause in our conversation. I was about to take another bite of food when I heard the sound of running footsteps above us, upstairs. I immediately dropped my fork and looked up. "What was that?" Sarah asked. "I don't know, but it sounded like footsteps, like someone was running," I replied. I started trembling from fear, and Emily started to cry. I wasn't sure what to do. Our father wasn't home as he always came home late and drunk from work anyways. "What do we do?" asked Sarah. "I'm not sure. We'll wait here until father comes home," I replied. I know he'd be furious if we were still awake when he came home, but I didn't care if I got the belt. I was more scared of what was upstairs. We sat there for several hours waiting for our father to come home. I fully expected to get beat the second he walked through the kitchen door, but was taken back when all he said was, "What are you kids still doing up? Go to bed." He then stumbled his way up the stairs towards his bedroom, with us right behind him. Sarah and Emily shared a room, but that night we all slept in my room with the door closed and the chair in front of it. The next morning as I went downstairs, I had a feeling to check the dolls. I don't know why, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the dolls had something to do with the footsteps we'd heard. As I got to the entrance of the living room, I slowly peeked my head around to have a look, scanning the room to see if some of them were out of place, but none were. The last one I looked at was Annabelle. She appeared to be in the same position as I'd last seen her. I shook my head at the crazy thoughts going through my mind at that moment, then went to the kitchen to make breakfast. A few months went by with nothing happening, and my sisters and I had pretty much forgotten about that night. Then it started again. I remember it being a Friday because on that day of the week, our father sometimes wouldn't come home until the following morning, and this was one of those Fridays. It was really late. We were in the bathroom that was next to the kitchen, getting ready for bed. I was brushing Emily's hair and talking to her about something when suddenly, again, we heard the running footsteps upstairs. This caused me to drop the brush I was using and stiffen up with fear. My sisters immediately froze, looking straight at me with terrified looks on their faces. "Elijah, what do we do?" whispered Emily. "I don't know," I replied. Right then, we heard the running footsteps again. It seemed like they were going from room to room now. Both my sisters screamed out in fright, ran into the corner of the bathroom, huddled down, and started crying. I quickly shut and locked the bathroom door, then slowly backed up towards my sisters. I put my arms around them both and just held them tight. I tried comforting them, but they had no idea I was as scared as they were. We stayed in the bathroom all night until our father came home the following morning. When he came home, he went straight to his room and went to sleep. I remember that day, as our father slept, we talked about what we should do, and I mentioned running away. We had an uncle and cousins we really liked that lived out in Las Vegas, Nevada. But how would we get out there? We also discussed what we thought the running footsteps were from. My sisters thought it was a ghost, but I had my suspicions on what I thought it was. I never told them my thoughts for fear it would frighten them something awful, and they were already scared enough. We never mentioned the running footsteps to our father for fear he'd get mad, and we knew he would do nothing if we told him anyway. Over the next week, we were all on edge, and every little sound would make us jump. Things eventually went back to normal, and what happened that night slowly faded away from our short-term memories. A year later, in October, our father had gone away for the weekend to Atlanta with his new girlfriend and had left me alone to watch over my sisters. At this point in time, he seemed to be doing better. He was drinking less and was happier. We all hoped it would last. It was a normal Saturday night, and we'd gone to bed. I'm not sure how long I'd been asleep, but I started having a dream. I was standing in my Aunt Martha's house when I heard some talking coming from upstairs. I slowly started walking up the stairs towards my aunt's room and paused right before the doorway. I could hear my aunt talking to someone. I continued slowly walking and stopped when I saw my aunt sitting on her bed, holding Annabelle in her lap. She was looking at her as she was saying something. It was then Annabelle turned her head, looked directly at me, and smiled. I was scared to death and screamed as I ran back downstairs and outside. That was where my dream ended. Right then, something woke me up. It was the sound of running footsteps going past my bedroom, then heading downstairs. I immediately jumped out of bed and shouted out to my sisters, "Sarah, Emily, are you all right?" There was no answer, so I shouted out to them again, but no answer. I ran over, flipped the light switch on in my room, then ran down to my sister's bedroom. As I flipped on the light, I screamed out in horror at what I saw. There was blood everywhere, and my sisters were not in their bed. I looked down and could see the foot of one of them sticking out from the other side of the bed. I ran over and gasped at the horrific sight I saw. They lay there, the bloody bodies of my sweet little sisters. There was so much blood, it's something I've never forgotten. I started crying as I knelt down beside them, grabbed their shoulders, shaking and yelling at them to wake up. As I knelt there, I noticed there were little footprints in their blood, and just above their heads on the floor, written in blood, was the name Martha, with a question mark behind it. I stood up as I trembled with fear. I knew I had to get out of the house, and fast. I quickly ran downstairs towards the front door, turning on all the lights along the way, but something made me abruptly stop halfway in the living room. I looked over at Annabelle and couldn't believe it. She was sitting there, but her hands were covered in blood, and there was blood dripping down from her mouth. I almost fell down as I stumbled over to the front door, opened it, and took off running down to the nearest neighbor's house. Being my Uncle Martha's husband had moved away, it was about a half-mile to their house, and it was the middle of the night, but I didn't care. I ran as fast as I could. Once there, I knocked on their door and told them what happened. The father told one of his teenage children to get help and that he was going to my house to see if there was anything he could do for the girls, but I knew he could not. They were already dead. I was told to wait there. Several hours later, the police arrived and took me with them down to the police station. I was considered a suspect and was questioned for quite a while by several different people. I told them everything, starting back from when we first started hearing the running footsteps in the house, to the name written in blood, the footprints, and the doll having blood on it. They looked at me like I was crazy. The police said they never found the bloody footprints or my aunt's name written in blood like I described. They also said none of the dolls had blood on them. I didn't care what they said. I know what I saw, and I never doubted myself. Those images are burned in my mind forever. I know she cleaned it up when I ran out of the house. My father came back home late on Sunday and came to the police station. He was very cold to me, saying very little. I knew he thought it was me, or I was at least somewhat responsible for the deaths of my sweet little sisters. The police eventually released me and blamed the murders on being a random intruder. They never completely figured out what weapon or means was used to kill them. They think they were choked to death first. Then the killer used their bare hands to tear them apart. They said there did appear to be small bite marks on them. One of the scariest moments of my life, aside from finding my sister's bloody bodies, was walking back into that house and seeing Annabelle sitting there, looking at me. I swear she was staring at me as I walked past her. That night, as I laid in bed, I made the decision to run away to Nevada early the next morning to live with my uncle, and I've been here ever since. I heard my father went into despair and eventually drank himself to death. He lived in that house until his demise, and I never saw him again after that night. I never heard what happened to Annabelle or the rest of my aunt's dolls.